Welcome to The Choice of a Young Voice. This is the program where we need to learn to make good choices as young people living in these last days. And so today in particular, we are talking about something very important. Yes, you know, okay, every episode we talk about very important things. So please don't miss any episode. If you've missed the previous ones, go to YouTube and check them out on our YouTube channel. So today we are talking about setting boundaries. Yes, setting boundaries. It's something we need to learn in this generation. My name is Caroline Okoth. I am your host, and on set to help us understand more about this topic are a lovely couple. This is Mr. and Mrs. Ted and Bilha Kenya. Bilha, just say hi, greet the viewer. I don't know, say something.
Hi.
Ted.
Hello.
Karibuni sana. We're so happy to have you here. And as usual, we have our audience of young people here who are ready and eager to learn, ask questions, and yeah, for us to interact and grow together. Yes, so we are talking about setting boundaries. This is in a very general, I don't know, aspect. We're living in a time where even as Christians, so many things in the world today have become so normal that we don't realize that we are crossing boundaries. And I think we want to identify those boundaries, especially in relationships, whether it's with friendships, with your parents, with your boyfriend or girlfriend. That's what we want to establish. How can we set those boundaries? Yes. Do you think that's important? Do you understand boundaries? Okay, let me ask you guys. How are the ways young people cross boundaries? I've left this question so generally to just hear your thoughts. How are the ways we have crossed boundaries in how we relate with people? Yes. Thinking. I can give. Ken, yes.
I'm trying to think the word limit or boundary with the aspect of temperance. So it means that we've exceeded some points. And one of this is through indulgence. I'm trying to use, okay, I don't want to
just
be very
say it
direct.
as it is. What do you mean by indulgence?
Let me say, for example, fornication.
Okay. Any other way that we cross boundaries in relationships? No other. Okay, we'll hear more from the guests. What do you think about the different ways young people are crossing boundaries today?
I think it's important to first begin with what is a boundary. I like my brother's definition. It's a limit. So it's a sort of periphery, a guideline, a guardrail that keeps us within a certain confined space. And that's in terms of interactions, even in terms of how we think. Boundaries are something that are across everywhere. Rules are also a good synonym to boundaries, because if you want to think about the simplest way of thinking about boundaries is how a certain country ends a certain place, and then even counties are divided into boundaries. So when you talk about geography, boundaries also is a term that keeps coming up, but it's not something that the world came up with. It is something that God came up with a very long time ago. Boundaries are a good thing. They're not a bad thing. I remember in primary school, there was always like, if there's a place where there's good grass, nice green lush grass that's been kept, you're told there's a boundary where you can't step on the grass. And if you step on the grass, you get punished. And so we grew up having a very negative attitude towards boundaries. But they're actually a very good thing, because they keep us safe. Boundaries are not for the person who created the boundary. It's for us. We're the beneficiaries. So I just wanted to set that as a good introduction for what is a boundary. So how did God set it up in the beginning? Who came as a creator of everything? Of course, he set rules. He put them in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, and then he said, this is how far you go. This is the tree that you are allowed to eat of. And this is the tree you're not allowed to eat of. He could have allowed them to do whatever they wanted, but he had to set boundaries. And when we broke the boundaries, what happened? Sin came in, and then death, of course, was introduced. So I just want to say the boundaries are from God. And then number two, they are good for us.
To protect us.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add?
Vile amesema. Anyway, but to add on to that, really, boundaries are a good thing. And I think many times it's been framed as a negative thing. But just to add more territories to that, because I think many times we tend to isolate it when it comes to relationships. We're like, okay, now is when we want to think about it. But if we look at it in totality, I need to think about the boundaries of my money. Do you know, the worst thing I can give to you is money and tell you that, just give you money and you don't know where it ends. You know, even the same way, you need to know that you have this amount of money and this is where it ends, so you can plan. If you, assuming you have got an amount of land and you're told you don't know where the boundaries of your land is, so it becomes, do I weed that side? So this time I plant, next time the neighbor is harvesting my land. So, you know, the boundaries makes me know that this is the area I need to focus on. If it's manure, if it's fertilizer, this is the, even within the family unit, I know that this is the wife. I have one wife. That's my boundary. So that's the one I need to find out how she's doing. You know, it applies in many other spaces. It is my how it applies to. I mean, even your family. Just you know, the idea is you're meant to invite people. But if everybody's your family, God even gave us that particular provision that we have family. So the rights that if you're my family member and if you're another church member, it's already a boundary. It's not that I don't like you, but I'm not sharing my cake with you. You know what I mean? But it's just that boundary has helped me not have to make an excuse or an explanation about that. So I think being able to celebrate boundaries helps us to just now put our energies where it needs to be. So I think when you start looking at it from that place, then it helps us with, like I mentioned, with our finances, with our time. I have a boundary of how much time this is going to go on. And if I continue talking now, she'll stop me because she'll tell me I've crossed my boundary and how much time I'm talking.
That's
you know, so I think just it applies like that. So let me turn back to you.
Thank you. Yes, now you've understood what we are talking about. Boundaries in many aspects. And of course, maybe we can't talk about everything, but maybe we'll just narrow it down to how we relate with people. For example, let me give an example of us young people and parents. Are there ways we cross boundaries in that kind of relationship? I don't know. Are there ways we cross boundaries? Think about it. Do you know any way that you can cross a boundary? No way behind there.
Actually, there are very many ways which either of the parents or the children cross each other's boundaries. For example, I have seen more so the marrieds. See, actually find that maybe a mother-in-law actually seem to have rights over the married son, you know. Actually, she gets into too much affairs. Anataka kuingilia sana into the married family.
Yes.
And I think that's crossing boundary.
That's true. That's a good example. Yes, Baron.
You said that these are laws set to guide us. Like in every family, all the parents, I think in the families we have do's and don'ts. So when you're in the family, the parents have the do's and the don'ts for their children. So in any time that you will pass, when a parent says that I don't want you to do this, I don't want you to go here, I don't want to interact with this person because of this, then when you go beyond, then you're crossing the boundary of your parents.
That's true. One last one before we continue.
Okay, as young people, it reaches a certain age where we also need our own time and privacy. And so you realize that dealing with some parents at that age becomes quite difficult because they are hard on you, they just bump into your room. And so they cross our boundaries at times. And you become harsh with them, but again you realize these are my parents, and so being harsh to them will make me suffer more. So you have to just laugh around, but in real sense you are screwed down.
Wow. Thank you for your okay, let me just give you one.
Thank you. Another one is you'll find that some of our parents also crosses our boundaries. You find a parent really wants to choose you a friend, you know, a partner. So, you know, we also have our rights to choose. So that is also crossing of boundaries.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm hearing more thoughts of how parents are.
Maybe as a parent, I can try to talk about that a bit.
Yes.
I think it's important for us. I'm learning now as a parent that I'm bringing up, my daughter I'm bringing up to be an adult, not to be a child. And I think sometimes it's not a one size fits all, but if it fits where it, that sometimes we are growing up, but we continue acting like a child. You know, so our parent will continue treating us as a child as we continue treating as a child. In the event your parent walked into your room and your tantrum was like that of a child, then be like, niko na mtoto kwa nyumba, you know. But if you're like, yes, daddy, you know, then they'll be like, oh, I'm dealing with an adult. So that is in itself a way to set a boundary. I don't need to come and say that this is my bedroom. Just the way you will conduct yourself. And I find like in life many times those boundaries are set. They are not, I mean, it's not your textbook kind of way. Yes, there are times you need to, because I feel like by the time you're usually setting it out the textbook way, it's already a big violation. By the time you're saying that, why are you doing this? You know, there's a way, first of all, like, why did you come this close? Like, you can come and sit close to me, and the way I can look at you, you'll know that I think it's important for you to, you know, just withdraw. Yeah, I didn't need to say that, you know, you're coming so close to me, and you know, it's already a reaction. So I feel like just being able to, I would like us to figure out ways in which we can set these boundaries in a way that when you walk out of here, it's something we start practicing. So we can make it such a big theory, and then you're like, okay, so how does that apply? But the truth about it is they're happening every day. And when we're cognizant about it, when we're thinking about it, like, because I think also as a, again, I'm speaking on behalf of parents now, is I don't think there's a parent who usually wakes up and thinks, how can I violate my child's boundaries today? You know, so if a parent is not doing that, then I think it's because maybe on your part you need to be more proactive or communicate. Because even you can just have a conversation, not even about what happened. Then your parent is like, I think now this one is past that. You know,
so communication is one.
Communication is really a big way to have those things. Because there are times that you find people saying that. I know that you guys were more focused on relationships, but I find like relationships don't work in a silo. You know, they don't work on in their own spaces. So if it's going to be even at work that my boss is going to ask me to do something that I think I should not do, but maybe day one when I stepped into work, I was the guy who was like, oh, boss, you're coming, let me carry for you your bags. Then, is there anything else you have in the car? I went and got it, So the boss is like, oh, this is what so-and-so likes to do. So next time they call you, they tell you, hey, but they please go and pick this thing. But you're like, but I want to sit in this meeting. You gave out that boundary. You know, you extended them. You told them, you're welcome to take my time the way you want to, and da-da-da. Yeah, even on public holiday, you know, but you told them that it's how we set up those things. But if you walk into a space and you really help them know that this is how this thing plays out.
From the start.
From the start. Yeah. It helps. I mean, I know this will dominantly be watched by Adventists, but it applies across when it comes to even like work boundaries.
Yes.
I have worked, consulted for now, it's almost, is it 18, 20 years? Anyway, it's a long time. And those years are not hard to work on Sabbath. And many of the times it's because I communicated it on the onset. So I was able to set that boundary, tell them that, hey, this time I am not able to come in at this time, but I tell them what I can do for them. This time we can plan, we can make a plan, you know, and then it becomes a thing. So I won't say that I'm being persecuted because I front-loaded it. There are times that will come and I don't outrule it. And I think with also many other places. So when it comes to relationships, you also know where that is going to. So I think maybe now we've given a really big, broad one.
Yes.
Now let's
narrow it down
a bit more.
Thanks. Bilha, do you have anything to add?
Not to the general definition.
Okay, good. I actually like that you brought in work boundaries, because that's something we also struggle with as young people. And maybe, I don't know, for some reason, maybe it's because we don't, again, we've talked about worth before, maybe because we don't know our worth in Christ. But even as ladies, sometimes at work, we cross boundaries with our bosses.
And at school, we cross boundaries with our lecturers.
Yes, and at school, we cross boundaries with our lecturers. I don't know, maybe we can talk about that particular set of boundaries for a bit, Bilha.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, when we're looking through boundaries, discussing with Ted, we came up with basically three ways in which we young people, we young people,
you're not young anymore. Sorry.
Cross boundaries, and so we define them into three. So there's one, the physical boundaries, which is more common than physical stroke sexual. It's kind of the same thing. And then of course there's emotional boundaries, and then there's financial. So when we're talking about physical boundaries, boundaries, we're talking about being a bit too familiar with the opposite sex. So it could be your lecturer, it could be, sometimes it's even your family member. I know some family members who are just a bit too close for comfort. Like, who are just like, the dad will come like, hi, with a 21-year-old girl. You're like, ataka nikupendana. As in, there's so physical boundaries most commonly are crossed, I think, amongst peers, but we can cross them with anybody, whether they are much older, whether they are much younger. And I mean, to go on the extreme, which is not even so extreme anymore. Like sometimes it's as a result, that extra familiarness with a family member could be as a result of sexual abuse when they were younger. I admired a girl when I was growing up in my teenage years. I used to tell my dad, why can't you love me like her? Because I used to find that they are so close with their father, as in there's nothing he wouldn't do for her. So it broke my heart later to find out that she had a child by her father.
Oh no.
And so that closeness that they had was because he was trying to cover up for what he had been doing behind the scenes.
Oh no.
So not all that glitters is gold, and so it's important that we guard those things from a very young age. But physical boundaries just means being too close for comfort, and sometimes it's your comfort that is being interfered with, where you just feel, as though that lady just tapped my back, that I felt weird. Or sometimes it's you who is infringing on someone else's comfort, and it's okay for you to be open for them to tell you, by their brother, there's a way unanisalimianga sisikiangi comfortable. Like it's okay, like to receive that feedback.
Now that's what I want to ask. Not some people are afraid to be open about their boundaries, or they feel like, like workspaces, for instance, or if I do this, my boss will, or I'll get fired, or what will they think of me, or does it mean you have to have this bold personality for, I don't do this, I don't know.
I think if that's your personality, I don't know, but I would recommend a positive way to it. Tell us what you can do. Let us not be known as the person to, chukwangi chaya, chukwangi nyama, chukwangi akuna, and you're just known for not showing up. And we know you for the things you don't do, but what can you do? Fine, it's okay, you don't show up as Sabbath, you don't eat meat, that's good, but what can you do? Because all those things you're saying are not helping us here. So what is it that you can be able to do about those things? So I feel like those kind of, when in the work scenario, I don't know which type of space you'd be able to give it. What first of all is, I think workspaces usually have a job definition, so I know what is bringing me to work. So that is what I should answer to. Like, my work requires me to make sure that the cars are done. So let me show up and do whatever needs to be done in the cars. That's what has brought me here. Then I'm like, now I've done that which brought me here. But it's something else to be like, I'm not sure that's what I'm supposed to do. Yes, there's a place of courtesy where you want to establish the boundary that this is not part of my regular thing, but I will do it, because it's one thing to show up for work where my work is, say I'm a mechanic, and my work is to make sure that I've made sure that the car's brakes are clean. But then if somebody tells me, oh, please clean for me this car, so I wash the car, but you've not sorted out what was meant to be done. So that's somebody, basically you're possibly enabling somebody else's laziness or something like that. So, but when somebody lets you know that, hey, sorry, I can't help you with this, so-and-so is the one responsible for that, and then it is known, because sometimes it could be even a mistaken identity. Somebody looked at you and they thought that this is what you do, and then you go and say, what am I kuzoea? Then you're like, pole. So sometimes I think that's why it's important to communicate, and I think even that notion of being scared, which was maybe taught in school or learned, and it can be unlearned. So I think it's really good to even like when it comes to even dealing with authority, whether it is police or others, it's just good to enforce what you're doing. This is what I'm doing. I am going to instead of saying, see Mimi, you're already on a defensive, but what are you doing? I'm like, first I'm greeting you and I'm telling you that this is where I'm going, this is what I'm able to do around this space. In the work environment, I'm like, I feel uncomfortable about this. I've interacted a lot with many Muslims, and I just like how nobody ever offers them pork.
Because they know.
It's an issue. So it's just, you know not to do that. Did they have to put up a placard, be aggressive about it? You just know. So I feel like it comes in that kind of space.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Ken.
I'm trying to see the outcome of setting these boundaries as helping us to be more reserved, something like that. But this is my question. How are we supposed to have those boundaries, especially in our interactions with people, without being cold to them? because I remember seeing people having many social classes back in campus because of that. Maybe because they don't want to associate with someone who does some things that are not right. But to these other persons, the victim, it comes out as our watu wako so called on us, something like that. So how are we supposed to have those boundaries, knowing
and
that
be lovable?
Yes.
Bilha?
I don't know. I think when we set boundaries, initially it's not going to be a happy, nice, song service. Initially, it will hurt. It hurts when you, in the case of parenting again, it hurts my daughter. The very first time I tell her, don't touch the gas cooker. There's that feeling of, wow, mbona unanishautia, you get. But eventually it becomes now normal. So I think we should be prepared for the initial negative experience and feelings. Because you can imagine you're telling your boss, I'm not comfortable with the way you're talking to me. Initially he feels a bit embarrassed and it's a bit, even on your part, uncomfortable. But eventually you're both now aware of what you should and should not do. But once you go beyond that, I think if the change is made and you've made the request and the change is actually implemented, then you should have the maturity to just put it behind you and treat them still with respect and love even then.
Wow.
But back to the whole, how do you set a boundary, especially when you're shy or you don't know. I think using a third party, would be very helpful. In the case of work, it's much easier because you always have a HR department or someone who handles your recruiting. Whoever it is that hired you, and you can just go and in privacy tell them this is what you're not comfortable with, and they can walk you through what you can do and possibly escalate to the party involved. In case of a family, ideally should be another family member who you tell. In the case of friendships, of course, you tell maybe a common friend. If the three of us are friends and I'm offended by something you did, I can go to her. But always do it in prayer because it's really God who convicts the heart of guilt. It is not us. Even if you create a 4-page summary of why and what time and how it felt, it's really God who convicts our hearts to know that what we did was wrong. Yeah, so always pray about it before you confront the person. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Any other comment? Let me give her.
Okay, I have a question. As young people, is it really right to set boundaries as far as evangelism is concerned? As in, you have different faith and they also have their own way of worship. Should we set boundaries when it comes to evangelism?
I like that question because I think my understanding has been, I've grown up, first of all, just context is I've grown up in church my life, and then I went and stayed out in other places. For a long time, I believed that only people within church are kind. Then I met people outside church who are kinder than church. Then I became confused in some spaces. Then but then the thing is, I just want to see that truth is progressive. There are things that we have grasped that they have. The things that we have, we know the light we have, and the things that they have also learned from. So I just feel like if we go with the aim of sharing something beneficial like a friendship, then it becomes easier to have a conversation. I'm not going to go with I'm not going to approach it in like politicians that this is my party and that is, I won't be that aggressive about it, but I would like to really understand what is it that, what's your understanding of Jesus? I'm like, okay, it makes a nice conversation. And I aim at the end of that conversation not to annoy somebody. So if in the event that I hear that and I'm like, but the Bible, this is my understanding about it. What do you think about it? Anyway, I'll take more time to think. So you make a conversation about it. I think when you approach something with a very stone wall, it's hard to penetrate. But if you're able to listen to, then you can be able to help join dots. Because in terms of faith, when you doctrinally look at it, there are largely, is it 5 pillars that separate us and we don't encounter them on the daily? So we got all those other ones that we already have in common. So why do you want to make somebody an enemy based on those kind of things, or want to confront them? But it's easier using those other ones to eliminate the other 5 that we're talking about, So I think that would be my approach to it.
Thank you. We're talking about setting boundaries, and so far we've touched a little bit on physical boundaries, and you said we need to talk about emotional boundaries and financial boundaries. So dear viewer, do not go away. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about those types of boundaries, and now how, again, we've talked about it, but to emphasize how we can actually set those boundaries as as young people for our benefit. So don't go away, we'll be back. Welcome back, viewer. We are talking about setting boundaries in many aspects of our lives, physical, emotion, financial, and we want to continue with this discussion. We were at physical, though, okay, we've talked about many others, but let's talk about the physical boundaries now, and you could finish your train of thought of how we can set boundaries physically.
Yeah, so I mean, our physical boundaries, like we had mentioned earlier, can be infringed upon by different kinds of people. It's not necessarily someone we're interested in or someone who's interested in us. And we mentioned also earlier that once you feel, because you always feel that discomfort within yourself, that it's good to address it. Because I think what we do is help the perpetrators to continue in that motion by not speaking up. And we said that we don't necessarily have to be the one speaking up ourselves, that we can find an advocate, a third party who can speak up on our behalf.
Truth.
But physical boundaries generally that's in the case where someone is coming to you and you genuinely did not have any interest in allowing for that boundary to be crossed. But in our age set, we do usually want the boundary to be crossed.
Yes.
We are usually very happy for the boundary to be crossed.
We invite
when we're a
it.
bit, oh, look how my skirt has gone on there, and how complain, you're just there. As in, it's not usually a big problem. And so I think it takes us back to, like someone mentioned, temperance. It's a very good word. Like for God, really God is one who will help us in how we relate to the opposite sex, on how to keep those boundaries godly. Otherwise, our natural inclination is to break all boundaries possible. And of course, we're in a very sex-saturated world, with the media showing how boyfriends and girlfriends how should relate. At times, it's very difficult to have to come back and say, what did God have in mind? Especially when I genuinely have an attraction to person A or person B. And so it's important for us to always come back to God and to ask God to help us to be temperate in the way we are setting boundaries.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. I think the also thing maybe I'd add to that is for us to also remember the benefit of keeping the boundary. You know, when I remember the benefit, you know, because the Bible is alive to these things. It doesn't pretend that those things. So when you hear Solomon talk about, oh, daughters, Zion, be careful not to start lie before it's time. It's like telling you, set a boundary here. Don't start this thing before its time is able to, because there are things that sometimes we can try to, I don't know, is it misappropriate? We're like, okay, I'm going to sing very well, I'm going to do this very well, but this other one I'm leaving it ignored, you know? And it doesn't compensate. You know, it doesn't compensate for that. If I'm feeling that, okay, fine, when I look at this girl and it makes me feel a certain type of way, reading more Revelation does not deal with that particular one. I need to find out what is it I'm doing. Moving closer will help you more at that point than reading Revelation. You know what I mean? So the thing is just being realistic about those particular things and approaching them, because we're told, I'm not going to serve. I know that the more I interact in this space, the more it makes me feel, and the more I want to draw close to it. Then I want to tell myself that I was victorious today. Why victorious? Or if we're given more time, it would have gone otherwise, you know. So I think just that lingering and being honest about it. And I feel like, I know I'm going to cycle into something slightly different, because I have seen this type of thing happen where we say sometimes that this is what I am about. Then the test comes and you're shocked. You know, for a while you said, I'm a vegetarian. But also at that point in time, your finances were really low. Yeah? And then one day you're invited for a buffet. Then you said, mi ukolanga tu nyama hapa. Like, you know, so you see, we're not sure you're a vegetarian when there's no meat. So that's not being a vegetarian. You know, and the point is also that kind of thing is, if we're to use that same example, is, are you sexually pure because you've chosen, or it's because the meat has not been, served, or it has not been displayed, you know? So it needs to be something that, not because people are seeing me, it's a choice I have made. I made this choice, and when I think about it, I'm like, no, that's not where I'm going. So if anything else that is being fed that does not meet my appetite, then it's clear in my mind. So when I own a decision from many other spaces, it helps me put guardrails and gives me the things I could focus on what to do. So and because, you know, the thing about don'ts is they actually enable you. You know, if I'm just going to tell you, don't think about sex, what are you thinking about?
Sex.
So what should you think think about. So the more I think about the things I should think about,
Yes.
then my mind has less time to invest and develop this other thing that we're thinking about.
We had also mentioned the say what you mean and mean what you say. Oh, that's
Yes.
a big problem, especially for us females. And because you see, the emotions and the hormones are really genuinely jumping, and God created us that way.
Yes.
However, also we should not awaken love at the same time. So you're like, what do I do with all these things? So in addition to, of course, being physically fit and just keeping yourself busy with very positive activities, it's important to actually just flee. Like the Bible is not joking when it says flee from sexual. It doesn't
Run.
say walk away gently from sexual immorality. No, flee. There are times when you just have to be, like in the situation of Potiphar's wife, literally take off like a madman. Like do whatever it takes, because your flesh will overcome you if you don't make a quick decision. And so as for females, when we say, we should say what we mean and mean what we say. If we actually mean no, please Ted, give me space, then create the space yourself first. Don't wait for him to take action on that or to read some cues or whatever. It's very common for us also to say, I'm really not into him. I mean, sister, mimi sana, but you're always picking up his calls. You're always finding yourself in the same room with him. Like, what a coincidence. So, of course, naturally, he will read that you are also interested. And then he starts saying he's so forceful. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of false accusations have landed in the men's quarters, because we are actually not meaning what we say and saying what we mean.
Thank you. Maybe, hey, I knew it.
Hey, the man.
Let me give him the microphone.
Yes, I have a question to our guest. We are living in a society, and I don't know what advice they have for the young men and their mothers, because we are living in a society. Maybe to our parents, they're now retired and they're back at home. Then you'll tend to find that when it comes to the projects and advices that we are planning back at home, it is we and our mothers, to an extent that the mzee back at home feel misplaced. He feel like his boundary as a father is now out of order. I don't know what advice we can give to such scenario. And again, there's a scenario where, because I'm the firstborn, I'm now financially stable, then every decision has to come from me. I don't, to an extent that even to my siblings, our parents can just come to and complain to us that your brother so-and-so is doing this and this. And is in the process, like, you are overreaching someone's boundary. Thank you.
Before you respond, let's just hear a few more. Yes.
A question. How like young people, we have a lady and a man. Let's take it out from a relationship. You are getting to somebody because of a relationship, but you are friends. There is this thing that is common, that when I'm seeing with her today, tomorrow we are just storing, then something comes in mind. These people, there is something, but you are just friends. Like, I can be a friend to my brother. We have, if you get to us, the stories that we are making are just normal stories. But when we are seeing with her today, tomorrow, next week, we just seated making story, walking, there must be something. So how should we relate a man
and a lady,
a lady if there is nothing like a relationship in between?
Have that in mind. Here, give him a microphone.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask the guest which kind of advice you can give we youths who are in colleges or we are still studying, in a way that when you set your own boundaries, even to your parents or your fellow students, you find that now fellow students will be forming names. They will be now forming some funny names on you, because the way they want you to interact with them is not the way they expect. And on your side, you see it is right. On now on parents, the parents will now see that their son is now developing horns, something of that side. But on your side, you see the decision that you've made is right.
Okay, because of time I can't get too many comments from you. As you respond to that quickly. we can get into the emotional boundaries. Yes, Ted, Bilha, who wants to start?
Emotional, who's the emotional one?
No, before we get to emotional, there are 3 questions.
Okay.
Ati, who's the emotional one?
Boundaries, firstborn.
I think parents' boundaries firstborn. Wow, I think that's a...
Or maybe you handle the one for how do you be friendly? Because I think you're very good at that. How can you be friendly with a girl without like sending some wrong message?
I think it's important to have... okay, one is, I acknowledge that God made all of us beautiful. So don't be surprised when you talk to somebody and discover beauty in them. Yeah? Not all the beauty should I take home with me. I have all the beauty I need. You know, but the thing is, not every beautiful... So the things like, I guess like how you thought, your thought on something. I'm like, you know, and most people are willing to share their gift, you know. So it's clear this is what our interaction is about. This is, you know, I'm being able to identify that, so-and-so is very good at giving financial advice or planning strategic. I'm like, wow. So I'm interacting with them, and that story ends there, and I appreciate it on that, and it's out, you know. And my conversations are in a way that we could allow any other person in that conversation. But it's not something that we are talking, then you walk in and you're like, you know, then now we are like, there's something in that space. But yeah, and I think also it's important to have, I mean, in your age group, right? Not in age group, I think the whole idea of group dating is very important, because we underestimate the power of just the third party. You know, when in the absence of somebody else, you're authentic around your friends. You see, I can speak in a certain way, I can act. It's very easy to act on my own. When my friends are there, they'll be like, really, today you're not eating meat, we know you, you know. So at that point, it blows my cow, you know, if that's a thing I've been struggling with. But so it brings out the authentic youth. But when you're on your own, you're like, wow, you know, it's easier to put up an act. So you can be able to see somebody's for who they are and what their intentions are and how they interact with other people. So I feel like that's a thing, and not to put in those tensions in yourself. I know that this is the interaction, and if you feel that my mind is going a certain way, then at any time withdraw. There's no pain. Maybe, and cycling to the question he asked about people calling you a certain way because of how you're interacting, that is your blessing. That is your blessing. I know, and some of this, I mean, now with the years I've done post-youth, I can look back and say that a lot of those things just set me up for success because of people calling me a certain way then whenever they're having certain plans, I was not invited in those plans, which ended up in people having a lot of trouble that I was not privy to. Only when trouble came in, I was like, how, when? And I was so far back in the story, like, we can't even explain to you, because I was not there in the starting, you know. But when you want to belong, I think it's really good to belong in a place where, and I want to tell each one of you, there's a place where you just belong. You won't have to pretend. You want to be kind. You want to do your work. The people will accept you for that particular thing. Don't try to force yourself in an environment where you have to do something that goes against your principles. You know, especially if they're godly principles. Like that's what I think I would talk about.
Thank you.
Firstborn, I am there. Sometimes, there's a lot of pressure and responsibility that's laid upon you, and it's easy to crack and feel like it's just, because really it's not your job, you're not their parents, and it's okay for parents to consult with you, because there's a special place all firstborns have in their parents' eyes, and you are older, you should set an example. But I think it's time for us to break that silence with our parents and to just initiate a conversation and say, hey, Mom, Dad, this is how I feel about the kind of responsibilities you're laying heavily upon me. I know a lot of parents also lay the responsibility of school fees and mentorship and find him a job for all the siblings below you. And I don't think that's our job. I don't think that's what we signed up for. So I think it's important to just have that conversation. You specifically said something about mother and son, but I didn't get that very clearly. I didn't get it.
Maybe you could clarify.
Okay, mother and son, as in the complaints that your siblings are doing, then
so like your mother
are raised to you as if you are the one that should correct them, and in the process they feel like you are, they feel like you are now overreaching too much to them. To an extent, create grudges between you and your
siblings.
Yes, I guess.
Yeah, so just laying a very heavy, unnecessary burden on you, and yet you're supposed to be enjoying your youth just like your siblings are. I think a conversation is important. Have a prayerful conversation. If you have an uncle or an auntie who can, maybe a sibling of that parent who's laying on you the burden, involve them as well. So that way there's someone who understands you and also can advocate for you, but someone who's able to be respected by the parent who you're having the conversation with, enough to listen to them and say, okay, I never, because sometimes they genuinely don't even think about it from your perspective.
It's true.
Maybe they feel like they're giving you the respect na heshima ya firstborn to handle all these things, but it can be very overwhelming. So I would say just have a prayerful conversation.
Okay.
Maybe something small to add to that. I think to avoid getting to that, for when those are already there, apply that. But for those who are getting there, I think also as firstborn, it's good to distribute your knowledge, empower your siblings, so that you don't get to that space. Because if you're a firstborn and you keep on hoarding information or knowledge, then you become that person who wanakutegemea, you know. But if you become that person who you teach them and you empower them, so in your absence, things move without you. So at some point you could be hoarding that thing, then it reaches a point where you're like, no, it's killing me, but you didn't, it was maybe not intentional, but now you've realized that actually I can send so and so to the shop, I can send, but before I'm the one who will go to the shop, I'm the one who will do this, I'm the one, work with them, so that even when you pull out, there is just equilibrium still within the home. And that's leadership, that is, it's a gift to you as a firstborn.
Emotional boundaries.
Emotional boundaries. So I mean, back
Did
to
we
that
agree who's
initial.
the emotional one?
We have emotional times, eh?
Emotional boundaries, though, I mean, it's just something that came up in our minds when we're thinking about how, like we said, you know, like in the case where you're not really saying what you mean and meaning what you say, and so you're sending one signal, but you're saying something else, you know, that I'm not very comfortable with the way but you're always showing up so that that thing can happen to you over and over again. And sometimes it's subconscious. Maybe you're not even aware that you're doing it or you're sending out those signals. So I think it's very important to be very self-aware. The sooner the better, because I mean, I had a friend who I really loved because she would say, I cannot be in the same room with a guy alone. And I used to find it so, why? And then she's like, because I know myself. I know what will happen. And I think it's important to know yourself. We are all wired very differently. We are prone to certain temptations more than others. I mean, some of us it's food, sometimes some of us it's sexual inappropriateness, some of us it's lies. We all, I think it's good that the Holy Spirit reveals to us what our weaknesses are so we can be self-aware and just run from those sort of temptations. But emotional boundaries can be broken, for example. Constantly entertaining someone who you don't have any affection for, or rather you claim you don't have any affection for, and have no plans to further the relationship with, but constantly sending the opposite signals.
Yes.
So this could even be as simple as Michael calling me, and I'm always picking up, but I say I have no interest in Michael. It's strange. Like you can say exactly where he is right now and what he's doing, but haunanga interest.
You just like the attention.
Yeah, so that's one way we can break emotional boundaries.
Yes.
And I think also the thing about emotional boundaries is we go through heavy things. You know, it could be I lost a job, it could be I got a job, it could be I'm going through this particular trial. That kind of confiding in somebody of the opposite sex at that point, if you're confiding in them, they better be, I mean, it's very good to get the clarity of that, because those are the ways in which you draw people's emotions in and out, you know. So this is the person who, oh, I'm really having a bad day, and so and so is like, they look at you and they come and start talking to you in the corner, and you talk, you're like, okay, now I feel better. You know, then so you and you keep on pulling on drawing into that kind of emotion. So you can confuse yourself or mislead somebody in that kind of space, because maybe there's to you that's the only time that you deem them useful in your life. Or I mean, those are the situations. Some may sound extreme, but I know you guys may resonate with it when there's a bereavement, and then how people can really draw close. You know, you're there in the morning for breakfast, lunch, supper. You know, and you know in the morning you're the first person again seen. So there's a way in which it's good to support, but in that also thing there's some emotions that can easily cross. So I mean, it's okay if you're going to support, but if you're doing that, please
be consistent.
Be consistent with a group. If you have no intention, if you're feeling like, oh, so and so, I need to support them because of this, then I'll be with a group to support them. But if I'm the only one who's there all that time, then I start meddling with emotions that you're not ready to deal with.
That's true, because there are many cases of okay, this let's say a relationship. We talked about friendships. This guy and lady, they're just friends and they hang out all the time and they talk all the time. And for one party, probably the guy, he's like, she's my friend, we're good. The girl over there is, oh, they're so nice. he dropped me home the other day. That happens to us. Doesn't that happen? Like, and so later on, she develops feelings, and maybe what she communicates them, and then he's like, "No, we were just friends." Like, I get what you're saying with creating those situations. Ken,
I'd like to ask one in the context of, let's say, courtship or marriage. Naturally, I can speak to Caroline on a deeper level, or maybe a childhood friend, and I'm in this courtship with a lady. That conversation cannot go to that extent. Yani, okay, let me correct that. You're in a relationship, but the way you can talk to a lady who was your childhood friend, the conversation goes way deeper, and unakuwa very comfortable. You are finding that companionship in her, but you are in a relationship, not with bad intentions. Almost, it's actually natural, but you're in this other relationship where if something happens, let's say if a problem happens, I can easily talk to the childhood friend comfortably.
Be your girlfriend. Anyway.
I'm with Carol on that, because I think when you're looking at all these things in light of maybe you're setting up those boundaries, one, to keep yourself pure, to keep yourself away from drama, not being a father. I mean, not being a father before your time has come to be a father, being a mother before your time for being a mother has come. But I think it's also good for us to have that clarity, because I mean, I grew up in a space where in church I was called Brother Ted, you know. Every girl, I was just putting that brother zone, you know, like, So I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, maybe I can be more than brother, but you know, I was just putting that box. that boundary had been set for me being a brother. So what to do but to be a brother? God answered that prayer later on. Somebody saw me more than a brother. but the point is, when I was putting the brother, I respected. I just, you know, stated. But if I had intentions of saying I can be more than a brother, then I stated. But now the thing why I'm bringing that brother story is because sometimes we think that the person I need to marry needs to come away from so far away and needs to. So I'm so in love with the idea of marrying somebody from Lamu, Mombasa. And then when you come, you find that you don't really have a few things to talk about. Yet the person who really understands you is the one you're leaving here to go to Lamu. So and then you get surprised that I have nothing to tell my wife, you know? It's okay to go homegrown. Like, and that's like my point is, it's okay if, like, as we set out boundaries, I'm just giving us that tool to know that it's listen to what's happening in your environment. Because I mean, I'm speaking to the many of us who are brothers owned. I don't know if your people are also sisters owned. Because I know it was weird. I found it interesting that at the point that now I'd identified my wife, and I was like, oh yeah, it's my fiancé. They're like, kwani yakutuona? I was like, I was brother. I was, you know, and I respected the boundary, you know. but so that can happen. You know, it can easily happen. But it's so important for us, even as we interact in this particular age of being single and young, interact with people so that you understand what you want in life. Because sometimes we take an idea from somebody else, like, oh, my husband has to be very tall. He has to be this. Then the person who's tall, you're like, this story is
we don't.
You know. So nothing against tall people, or even it could be a short person for that. You know, because you are told maybe that's what you looked at. They look like the magazine said this.
Yes.
But when you interact with it, you're like, that's not really what I want. So as you talk to other people, you're like, yeah, you're nice, you're tall. If I need to get something from a mango tree, I'll call you. But that's it. But, I mean, it's okay. But I don't have mango trees every day.
Thanks, Ted. We've run out of time, actually. But the good thing is we are going to have another session with them where we'll talk about now relationships in depth. Yes, so Bilha, I just want you to give your last word of encouragement to the youth about setting boundaries, and we'll close it at that.
Mean what you say and say what you mean, and trust in God to help you to set those boundaries.
Mean what you say and say what you mean, and trust in God. Amen. What's your sentence?
Sentence is, God's grace is sufficient. In the event you have crossed a boundary, ask God to forgiveness and just to help you move out from that space. You know, God will serve a God of second chances, and He's more than willing to accept us in terms of helping us be where we need to be.
Amen. Amen. I hope you've been blessed by this discussion and we've learned a lot. it's important for us to set boundaries, and the only way we'll know actually what boundaries are and why they're important is if we go back to God, go back to His Word, read His Word, and understand His ways. That way we will know how to interact with the opposite sex, with our parents, with everyone else around us, so that, you know, we will be living lives that are pleasing to God and to man. I hope you've learned a lot. Thank you for tuning in. Please, next week, same time, same place, we'll be having more discussions that will help us make better choices in our day-to-day life. See you next week. Bye.